Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be looking at 10 horror novels that I would like to read sometime in the near future, and I'm going to be asking for feedback from you on which one I should add to next month's TBR, which, with it being the month of October, works perfectly. Get a little bit of horror mixed in with Halloween and all of that fun stuff. I think that's a pretty easy tradition for me to follow moving forward, and give me that extra push to read horror, which is not a genre that I normally go to as my first choice, but it is a novel that I think has some really interesting books, and hopefully some of you have read some of that and can push me in the right direction here. I have a list of 10 books that I'm going to be picking from, and one of those should end up on my October TBR. So let's go ahead and start with the book that made me want to do this list. I was watching Just Another BookTube channel's video on The Ring, and I think most people probably know this book from the movie. I think it was really popular in what was that, like the early 2000s, I guess. And you know, this is the story of a cursed videotape, and that's coming off Movie Knowledge. I don't actually know if the book follows that very closely, but this is the first one that I'm considering. I don't know, in his review, he kind of seemed like he felt like how I felt about Jaws, where the movie executed a little bit better on it in a couple different ways, but nonetheless, I was still kind of intrigued to get the origin story. Anytime, and there's a couple movie adaptations on this list, and I don't know, even if I've seen the movie, I always kind of like going back and reading the novel. So it piqued my interest. You know, this was definitely a cult classic, and a movie that I remember as a kid definitely scared me. I thought it was very creepy with her like crawling around on the floor and coming out of the TV. You know, as a kid, definitely very scary. So it is definitely one that I am considering. Next up, I have Boys in the Valley, and this follows the story of some boys in like a priest-run school, and basically some people show up who are involved in the occult, and something happens to them, and some kind of like evil spirit is released and starts affecting the boys in a bunch of different ways. That's really all I know. Sounds kind of scary. Not a big fan of like demonic stuff, so I think this one could be pretty spooky. Also, I think the setting would be kind of interesting and lead some credence to there being some like really freaky demonic religion stuff, so sounds pretty interesting. Next up, we have a very old book, and this is called The Monk. It was published in 1796, and this follows the story of a monk who is slowly being corrupted by basically a demonic force disguised as another person. This is actually a book that's been on my list probably in the top 3 longest of everything on this list. I heard about this a really long time ago, and it's just kind of something that I've pushed off, but it does sound really fascinating. One thing I do like about this book is that it's old, and so I think it will definitely have a different perspective on, you know, demonic possession, you know, morality, degeneracy, that kind of thing, especially with it being a book from so long ago, getting that kind of different look back into history on maybe some things that were definitely frowned upon that today, in today's society, we wouldn't even think, you know, again about. I think this one definitely has a lot to do with like sexuality and that kind of aspect. So I'm sure in a book written in about 1800, you know, the views are very different, and I'm curious on how that could be explored in a book that old. So I tried really hard not to just make this a Stephen King list, because I probably could have just done the 10 Stephen King books I want to read this October, but I limited myself to 2, but those are The Shining, which once again is a movie that I really like. I know that apparently King doesn't like the movie adaptation and doesn't think it was very well done and doesn't stay true to like the source material, but nonetheless, I have also heard it's a really good book, and I would like to read it. I really like the movie, like I said, so getting to experience it in, you know, King fashion would be great. I haven't read a lot of King. I think, is it the only Stephen King I've read maybe? So this is obviously, you know, one of his shining examples of one of his best books. So I would definitely like to get to that. And the other King book on this list is Misery. I think the idea of a writer being trapped by an eccentric fan and just kind of being held captive and like tortured and everything sounds like a horrifying experience, and just, I don't know, it doesn't sound like a fun read, but it sounds like a scary read, and that's kind of what I'm looking for here. This is obviously another King novel that has a great reputation, and you know, it's just something that I feel like I should read these two at some point, even if it's not this October. It definitely feels like something that I should get around to sooner than later, so that's why they both make it onto the list. The next 2 books are about vampires, and I guess I could have included another King book here, but I did not. I included Let the Right One In, and this book follows the, I don't know if I should say, the tribulations of a 12-year-old and then a child vampire. I think one thing that really interests me about this is the dynamic of having a child vampire that's hundreds of years years old. I don't know if that vampire is going to act more like an adult, or it's still going to kind of have that, you know, childlike quality to it, and then juxtaposing that to a modern, I don't know, modern day, but, you know, a child that is actually only 12-year-old. I think there could be some really interesting dynamics that go on between somebody who, especially if it goes down the route of really only having the mental capacity of like a 12-year-old, but one that's 100-something years old or even older. I don't know exactly how old it is. I don't know. I think it's interesting. And, you know, I'm definitely down for some scary vampires. And that is also why I included the legendary Interview with the Vampire. This is another one that has a movie adaptation that most people consider to be really, really well done. And this is another book that just feels like I hear so much about it. Pretty much universal praise is the only thing I've ever heard about it. So it kind of bumps it up on my list as something that I want to read. I don't really even know too much about it. I know we kind of follow the journey or the life of a couple different vampires throughout the story and kind of get, you know, what happened to them as they were vampires. And so I don't know if it is really even considered a true horror novel or if it's more of just kind of like, I don't know. I feel like with vampires, it's supposed to have some of those horror elements to it. So those are my two vampire choices. Next up, I have The Troop, which is kind of a body horror, which isn't something I normally enjoy too much. I have watched a couple movies that I think are okay that kind of follow this trope. And in this book, you have a troop of Boy Scouts that get stuck on an island where there is some kind of virus that turns into like a flesh-eating bacteria on them, and it's super contagious, and like it only takes a touch to like spread. And I don't know, I've heard that there are definitely some like really horrific scenes in this book, which is the whole point. I want some of that, you know, going forward. So I think I've heard a couple people have DNF'd it because it's very gruesome. And so I don't know, I don't really mind the gruesome stuff like that, but if it can give me some heebie-jeebies reading it, it'll accomplish its goal with me. Next up, I think this is another movie adaptation. I really should have maybe I'll just go watch all the movies, but is Rosemary's Baby. And I think this really follows the pregnancy of our main character who feels like something is wrong. She doesn't know why. She is kind of sick, and it has to do with the occult and demons and a demonic baby, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think I actually have watched this movie, talking about it, or something similar. I've seen something very similar to this, but once again, I like to read the novel if I have watched the movie, so this is another one that is up for contention. And last but not least, and I don't even really know if you can consider this a horror book, but I'm going to include Battle Royale, which is basically the book that, what's her name? Susan Collins, whoever wrote The Hunger Games, the story she basically stole to write The Hunger Games. This is a Japanese dystopian where they take like 30 high school aged kids, I think it is, and put them on an island and they have to like fight to the death. So I don't know if I really would count that as horror in the traditional sense. It is horrific, but I don't know if like horror, scary, spooky is really what that novel falls into. But it is one that I kind of want to read, so I'm going to throw it in here, and maybe enough people will tell me to go ahead and read it that I'll throw that in to my TBR in October. But that is my list of books. Please let me know which one you think I should read moving forward. I haven't really picked one yet. Like I said, I think if I'm leaning towards one, it's probably The Ring, just for the fact that I watched that video and it made me kind of interested. I don't know if it would be the best experience, but if you have any thoughts or suggestions on maybe some other books that I didn't include on this list that you think I should read, let me know, and definitely let me know which one from this list you think I should add on to the October TBR. But as always, I hope you have a good one.